Hi, today we're looking at our lesson 3.8 on finding our percents. No new vocabulary for this lesson, so just one example. So we're going to go ahead and look at the steps on how to find, if I give you a percent of a number, how to find what that percent is. So look at step 1. First thing it's asking you to do is to change a percent to a decimal, and you know we do that by dividing by 100, or what some people think of as moving that percent sign, that decimal, to the left 2 places. So we can't really do much when it's actually a percent itself, so we're going to go ahead and change that percent to a decimal, dividing it by 100, which would give me 0.25. Now the next thing I want you to know is the word of. In math, of means to multiply. So when it tells me 25% of, that of means I'm going to be multiplying, and I'm going to be multiplying it by that number, 40. So 0.25 times 40. And if you went ahead and multiplied it, now I think this one's pretty easy because if you look at it, whoops, there we go. 25, that's just 0.25 times 40. Forget the 0 right now. What's 25 times 4? 4 quarters is 100. And then I forgot that 0 at the end here, so I'm going to put it at the very end. And then remember, we have to put the decimal back in once I multiply it. Move it over 2 places, so 2 places. That gives me an answer of 10. 25% of 40 is 10. Simple multiplication problem. But you know that there's always more than one way to do a problem. So this is my other way. So we solve that one by just multiplying the numbers together. Or, big or here, or there's another way we could do it. And that is, we learned a percent is actually a number that's being compared to 100. We learned that when we learned the definition of percent. So let's go ahead and try it this way. I want to go ahead and rewrite the percent as a comparison, or what we know as a ratio, to 100. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've got that number 25%. And you know, since it's a percent, that's really 25 over 100. And again, that word of, same thing, of means to multiply. So let's go ahead and multiply that. Of means to multiply by that number 40. Now I hope you remember that you cannot multiply fractions and whole numbers. So if there is a whole number or a mixed number, we want to go ahead and change that just to a fraction. So I'm going to take that 40 and put it over 1. Once we do that, then we can go ahead and use our cross canceling. Remember, we try to actually reduce the diagonals before we start. Makes it a little bit easier for us. So I cannot reduce a 25 and a 1. Can't reduce that. But I can reduce a 40 and a 100. What goes into 40 that also goes into 100? Definitely 20. So let's go ahead and divide these both by 20. 20 goes into 40 twice. 20 goes into 100 5 times. And now my last step, just like before, I'm going to solve by multiplying the numbers. So let's go ahead and multiply those. 2 times 25 is 50. 5 times 1 is 5. And then we do need to go ahead and reduce if we can. And remember, we want to write it as a decimal. If I have anything left over, write it as a decimal if possible. So let's go ahead and reduce it. How many times does 5 go into 50? Well, that gives me 10, just like how I did it the other way. So same answer, Just two different ways to solve it. So let's try this one more time. 35% of 20. Now again, step one says the first thing I want to do is to change that percent to a decimal. So 35% is a decimal, 0.35. Of times, and multiply that by 20. So again, let's just pretend I can't see that 0 and do 35 times 2. Well, 35 times 2, 35 and 35 is 70. Now go ahead and, whoops, let me put that number back. Put that 0 I covered up. There is 2 places to the decimal when I multiply it, so I have to move a decimal at the end over 2 places. And when I do that 7.00, well, that's just 7. Now let's try it as that ratio. 35%, well, that's the same thing as 35 over 100. Of means to multiply. And we're going to be multiplying that by 20. Again, let's go ahead and put a 1 underneath that whole number. And let's see if we can go ahead and reduce any of my diagonals. 35 and 1, I cannot reduce. 20 and 100, oh yes, I can. 20 goes into both. 20 goes into 20 once. 20 goes into 100 5 times. And now let's go ahead and multiply. I get 35 over 5. Now again, I can't have a fraction, so I need to reduce it if I can. And 35 divided by 5, or 5 goes into 35, 7 times. Now the last one we're looking at here, I really don't want to use the ratio because there's a decimal. So to me, it's a little harder. Could you still do it? Absolutely. But let's go ahead and look at this one. Again, taking that 36.3% and let's turn it to a decimal. That would be 0.863 of means to multiply. And let's multiply that by 120. Now all I have to do is multiply these numbers. So let's go ahead and put 120 times 0.863. Well, 3 times 0 is 0, so I can go ahead and do my long multiplication here. I'll go ahead and do it a little bit faster. 2 times 6 is 12. Carry the 1, that would be 7. 2 placeholders down here. 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 1 is 9. And now when I go ahead and add them all up, you should get 103,560. But again, if there's a decimal, how many places to get to that decimal? 1, 2, 3. Which means in your answer, go over 3. 1, 2, 3. And that gives you the answer of 103.56. So again, when you're finding the percent of a number, change that percent to a decimal and multiply. Or make that percent into a ratio compared to 100 and again multiply. Once you can get those steps down, you'll find out that finding the percent of any number is not too difficult. So make sure you got your notes down ready to go, and I'll see you in class.